Hello and welcome to my floor where I'm sitting and addressing you from today. I hope you're very well. My name is Miranda and today I'm going to be talking to you about all the books I read in January of 2025. It being 2025 means this is my 5th year of making YouTube videos, which is actually kind of bizarre but fun. Well, yay. Anyway, books I read in January, some pretty damn good ones to be honest. The first book I read this year was Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker, I think is his name. I'll put the cover here somewhere. So this is a non-fiction account of a family from sort of the, I think it's sort of 1940s up to the present day, and they're 12 children, 10 sons and 2 daughters, and 6 of their sons were diagnosed with schizophrenia. So this kind of follows the entire family from the parents and their meeting and their sort of family history up to, like I say, the present day, where the youngest children are sort of still in nursing homes and various kind of care situations. And it follows the fates of all of these children and how their lives were affected by schizophrenia. Not just the brothers who had it, but also the how all of the family was impacted by this. The story of this family also manages to span a really big shift in the study of schizophrenia and psychiatry in general, and all of the kind of changes that happened in treating mental health issues in the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st century. This family also enabled decades of research into the kind of nature of schizophrenia, and very much the fight between the nature and nurture kind of sides of mental illness debate, really, and that kind of the different approaches that people took to understanding why schizophrenia exists and how it can be treated. It's just a really fascinating book and very, very well done in the way that it balances the kind of science and research and all of the kind of debates around this, and the personal side and the family's actual history and personal stories. And the way that that is handled together makes a really compelling and well-rounded book. So if you're at all interested in the history of psychiatry and mental health and trauma, but and also just, you know, family stories and interesting people that are very, very sad at times, then this is really, really good. Next I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. This is a kind of sci-fi romance story told in letters between 2 agents, I guess, on opposing sides of the Time War, but you never really find out what it is. And that's kind of the point. Doesn't really matter, it's irrelevant. And yeah, how they go from being opponents trying to kind of undo each other's meddling in time, to lovers who communicate via complicated letters. This is an interesting one because there are parts of it that I really, really, really liked. I enjoyed the sort of the build-up of tension and the way that the characters developed and their relationship developed, and the kind of world that you get thrust into, and how that kind of works, and the general sort of atmosphere I really enjoyed. It's very dark and militaristic and futuristic, but also feels somehow kind of ancient, I think, because they are moving through time and space and you see all of these different kind of versions of the world, including very old ones and very new ones. It felt like a story that was sort of, both new and old at the same time, and that I really enjoyed. However, I didn't really like the writing as a whole. I think for me it was just way too much. Like, it's trying to be clever and beautiful, but then it just kind of comes across as pretentious and a bit nonsensical sometimes, and hard to follow and unnecessary. Like, there were some moments where it felt like someone had just picked up a thesaurus and plucked out the most obscure word that they could find for no good reason. There's even a moment where one of the characters refers to, like, oh, my prose is getting a bit purple, and I'm like, yeah, you don't say. And that just kind of kept me at a remove from the whole thing, even though, like I say, I did like some parts of it and I was really trying to get into it. So not my favourite, but it was fine. Next, I read When We Were Orphans by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a strange kind of book. It primarily follows a man called Christopher from the sort of 1920s into the 1940s, and he was orphaned as a boy when his parents disappeared when they were living in Shanghai, and then he was sort of moved back home to England. Well, he doesn't consider it his home, but it's his where his parents were originally from. So and he has an aunt there or something, so he gets taken back there. But as he's growing up and into his adulthood, he is constantly trying to get to the point where he can go back to Shanghai and solve his parents' disappearance, because he believes that they aren't dead, everyone else thinks they are, but that he can find them by becoming a great detective. I've read 2 other books by Ishiguro before, and this is very reminiscent of the writing style of both of those. They're Never Let Me Go and Clara and the Sun, and I really enjoy it. Like, it's so kind of simple but beautiful. It's so easy to read and just get swept along into. Like, he writes in a way that I find it very difficult to put down or stop listening to as I was listening to the audiobook, but also not in a way that's like you need to know what's happening next, but just that it's so kind of easy to go along for the ride. It's so elegant and simple, and I really loved what this book did with memory and how our memories can kind of shape our reality, and how our current reality can shape what we remember. All of that was really interesting to me, and just explored so, like, with such a light touch. The exploration as well of the relationship between Britain and China and East Asia as a whole is really interesting, and again very lightly done. And the last scene in this book is just haunting. It's beautiful. This isn't like my favourite thing that I've ever read, but I did really enjoy it, and I just think Kazuo Ishiguro is a really good writer. I know, hot take, right? No one's ever said that before. He's just one of those writers that makes it seem effortless, and it's really impressive. Next, I read The Odyssey by Homer. This is a book that I have had on my TBR since I was at uni. A few years ago, I did a module about like retellings of epics, and for that I started reading both this and the Iliad, and I didn't finish either of them, but I've kept them and I've said I'll go back to them at some point, and I finally did. I finally went back to this and finished it, and I'm very glad I did, because at least now I can understand Percy Jackson a lot better, which is fun. The broad story of this is about Odysseus returning home from the Battle of Troy, and his journey that he goes on to get back. Although not very much of the book is actually taken up by the journey, which is what really surprised me. Like, there's a load more about his son, Telemachus, don't know how you pronounce that, and his sort of wanting to find his father, and his relationship with the people back at home. There are lots of suitors who've been trying to come and get his mum to marry them in Odysseus's absence. So it's a lot about him, and also like Odysseus gets home about halfway through, and at that point I was like, where are we going to go now? The pace of this is absolutely nothing like a modern book. It is very, very strangely paced, and that did kind of catch me a bit off guard sometimes. Like I really, really loved all of the bits where Odysseus is sailing home. He's going to all of these different weird places, finding all these monsters and having to kind of get out of different situations. And I did really enjoy the first parts as well, with Telemachus and Penelope, his mother, and all the different kind of dynamics going on the island that is Odysseus' home. But when Odysseus does get home and he then just kind of hangs around dressed as a beggar, trying to find out who is loyal to him, and then gradually revealing himself to people, and then he just goes on a massive killing spree. That kind of lost me a bit. Parts of this I really enjoyed, others not so much. Still an interesting read, and I'm glad I got back to it. Then I read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is, as you might imagine, about the Underground Railroad, but a kind of alternate reality version of it, where instead of just being a network of people that helped runaway enslaved people from the south of the US up to the north, it is an actual underground railway network, which I thought was really interesting. And you follow primarily one woman, Cora, and her journey as she escapes her the plantation and finds the Underground Railroad. This book is really, really difficult to read. It is harrowing and brutal and very, very realistic. It is also incredibly gripping and really hard to put down. There are so many twists and turns that just take you all over the place. Nothing is as you expect, and it's also really, really beautifully written. Like, again, it's so elegant and effortless that I just felt like I needed to kind of gobble up the entire thing. Very glad I finally got around to this. I really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend the audiobook as well, because it was just great. Next, I read Morality Play by Barry Unsworth. This is a historical novel set in 14th century England, following a priest a monk, who has been kind of exiled from his monkness order, I don't know, or he's just escaped actually. He's just gone off, he's gone rogue, he doesn't want to be a monk anymore, and he finds a group of travelling players whose, well, one of them has just died, and our friendly young monk decides that he is going to scoot on into this spot that has just been vacated and become a player, which he does. The story mostly focuses on when they go to a small village where a murder has recently taken place. They decide to put on a play of the murder as they understand it, and then kind of get caught up in investigating it and all of the things that don't quite make sense in their narrative that they've been told and that they are creating. This is an excellent little novel. It's so atmospheric, it's very wintry and takes you right into rural medieval England, and all of the kind of weirdness of it. The mystery is really well paced and well kind of explored. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and also the characters are fascinating. The relationships they have with each other, and also with theatre and creating stories, is really, really cool to read about. The way this examines kind of politics and justice and honesty and truth while also taking you right into the setting and the heart of these characters is really, really impressive. And I just thought it was brilliant. It's just one of those stories that feels kind of perfectly constructed and self-contained. The last book I read in January was We Do Not Part by Han Kang, translated by yaewon and Paige Aniyah Morris. And this was an early advance copy that I got from the publishers. Thank you very much, much appreciated. I loved this so much. It's so good. First of all, let's start there. This is about a writer called Kolker and her friend Inseon, and how it's so hard to explain. It mostly follows her journey through a terrible snowstorm to her friend Inseon's house on the island of Jeju, and what happens there once she is in the house and trapped by the snow. I went into this basically knowing nothing, and I think that's kind of how you should go into it, but just know that it is written so beautifully. I got really lost in it, the way that she describes the kind of scenery and the snow, and it's kind of all encompassing force and gentleness. It really sucked me in, and yeah, I found myself kind of absorbed by this totally. It did lose me for a little bit in the sort of third quarter maybe, where I was kind of not enjoying it as much, but you start to find out so much about the history of Inseon's family and the island that she lives on, and all of the horrible things that have happened there, and it's pieced together so effortlessly in a way that is incredibly dreamlike and really haunting, and yeah, I love this. I can't wait to read more of Han Kang's work. I'm so excited. So those are all the books that I read in January. I had a pretty good month, to be honest. It was a good time, and I really enjoyed most of these books. If you have any thoughts on them, if you've read any of them, if you want to read any of them, let me know. I want to hear about it, and tell me what you read in January. Tell me anything. Tell me what you had for breakfast. I want to know. Can't promise I'll care, but I'll read it and go, cool. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon.